Good afternoon. Hello, friends, and welcome to another LFG Live. Today, we are going to be continuing our Managing People Day to Day series. Today is Managing Performance Without Micromanaging. So, I did touch on this a little bit over some of the other lessons that we've done and other conversations that we've had, but this is really going to dig into how do we make sure people are performing without micromanaging them. But first, today is the last day of school for my kiddos. So if you're in my area, happy last day of school to all the moms and dads out there. This means our summer officially begins, for better, for worse, right? A little bit more stressful having the kiddos home, but certainly some time for some fun with them. So please enjoy your last few hours without the kids home, and then of course enjoy your summertime with the kids. I know I'm excited to do some fun activities and fun things with the kiddos, and already have their chore chart ready. But no, good luck to everybody. And what I'm drinking today, this is kind of part of our little science experiment with the kiddos. This is a blueberry tea, just a regular blueberry herbal tea, but with a twist. We actually created a ginger bug. For those of you who don't know, it's really just ginger, sugar, water, and the yeast on the ginger eats the sugar, creates a fizzy. So it's kind of making a fizzy drink without using carbonation. And this is the blueberry one, so it's almost like a blueberry soda. Kiddos love it, absolutely delicious. So my ginger bug blueberry tea today. So, all right, let's dig in. So today, again, we're going to be talking about micromanaging or not micromanaging our teams. This goes along with our series for this month, which is managing our employees day to day, looking at our calendar of what we've already gone over this month. We've had conversations most managers avoid, immediately followed up with how to give feedback that actually lands. Those two really go hand in hand. Today, managing performance without micromanaging. And then the next week, even if we've tried hard, even if we've done all these amazing things to try to really help and support our team, sometimes somebody's just not working out. So what happens when that happens? But today, let's lock in on our managing performance without micromanaging. So when I talk to some small business owners, especially those that are growing and are starting to bring some folks on and bring some teams on, which they didn't have before, is how do I hold my team accountable without being a micromanager? How do I do that? How do I even hold them accountable? I have to be there and see it. And I get why it's hard. The line between being kind of an involved leader and a micromanager, especially in a smaller business where we don't have multiple layers of leadership, can feel super thin. That line is thin, especially when you really care about the quality of your work, especially if it's something that is going to be delivering something that you're creating, right? And that could be either creating through, I know I keep talking about landscaping, but I work with a lot of those. It can be how your work is done in the landscaping world. If it's more technology, what does the output look like of technology? If it's executive services, what does that output look like? So I get it. It's tough to want to let that go. But what I've learned the most throughout my career in talking to different business owners and different employees is micromanaging doesn't come from control problem. That sounds weird, right? We think of micromanagers, we think of kind of control freaks and people who just want to control everything. But micromanaging traditionally for me, in my experience of what I've seen, does not come from a control problem. It comes from a clarity problem. Now we're going to go a few months back into some of my lessons and talking about our SOPs and talking about our guidelines and talking about clarity in our business, right? That was all the way at the beginning of the year, loops back around to this. It comes from a clarity problem. When expectations are not clear, managers fill in that gap by hovering. When you're not checking in regularly, when you're not having those clear cadences that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, where you're having those meetings, those one-on-ones, managers insert themselves into everything just to feel like they know what's going on and feel like they know what's happening. That's not effective. And today we're going to work on building the alternative. So let's dig in a bit. I always put that little asterisk in there, everybody, as we're digging into this. Not everything is going to be cookie cutter. Sometimes you're going to hear me say some stuff and say, well, that's not going to work for my business. And I get it. Everything I talk about here is to try to hit the most people as possible, but everything we do is fully customized. So if what you see here is interesting, but my talking points don't necessarily apply to you, that's why you give me a call, 732-508-0580, or reach out to me at daria@lemayfusiongroup.com, and we can customize this for whoever your business needs. But for today, we're going to talk about things on a grander scale and talk about the real definition of micromanaging and why good managers, great people, do it by accident. So again, micromanaging isn't caring about quality necessarily, of course, right? That's just good leadership. Everybody should care about the quality of what we're putting back. But micromanaging is substituting your judgment and your opinion for somebody else's decisions that they should own, right? You hire great people. You hire smart people. Oftentimes, you hire people that can do things that you can't even do, right? You hire people that are better at you at certain things. I've done that in the past where I've looked around and said, wow, where are my weak points? Where are the things I don't know? One of the last companies I was the CEO of, when I sat down and looked at it, I said, what area, and we really didn't have any executive level of leadership. I said, what area of business am I the weakest at? And that's who I hired first, because I wanted somebody who knew more than me. So of course I can't micromanage that person. I'm going to hold them accountable. I'm going to have conversations with them. I'm going to guide them, but I'm not going to micromanage them because I'm hiring amazing people. So when we're micromanaging people, we're substituting our own judgment for what we've hired them to do, for their decisions that they're going to make. So what are some real life examples of what this can sound like? One I can think of is, hey, can you run that email by me before you send it? Now, not one special email, not that email that has to go to a high-end attorney for some reason, or the email that's going to the President of the United States. That's a little different. I'm talking about the one that is a routine email that just goes out consistently over and over again. There's not much of a change, not much of a difference, business as usual, but that manager still needs to see it. Micromanaging. Or you have an outcome for something that turned out just great, turned out fine. And you ask, why did you do it that way? And not in a curious way, not in a, hey, you seem to do that really well. Maybe we're going to change our SOP based on what you did. Because remember, our SOPs are living documents. They're always growing and changing. If you're asking in that method, that's fine. But if you're just micromanaging, not okay. Another is redoing work that met the standard just because you would have done it differently. I've actually seen this happen live. I've seen this happen to some of my own work in the past, where somebody did a job and it turned out great. It was perfect. It was the way it was supposed to be. It was delivered correctly on time within the morals and values of the company, but the leader would have done it differently. Now, probably both would have done a great job, but redoing the job because it wasn't exactly the way you did it. Or a huge one, again, we talked about this earlier in the year, is becoming the bottleneck on every decision, no matter how small. Now, there are going to be big decisions that leadership has to be involved in. There's going to be some of those smaller ones we have to give our teams the ability to do. So some of our great managers that I've seen fall into this because the stakes feel high. It's your business, your reputation, your clients, your income, right? Your livelihood. But you can't override a decision that didn't need overriding, because then the message that you're sending is, I don't trust you. I don't want you to think. And people who don't feel trusted stop bringing their best thoughts and judgment to work. I'm going to talk in a moment about an example I've seen of that actually happening in real life in front of me. But they stop taking initiative. They stop trying to think. They wait to be told what to do. And then you end up managing even more because that team won't make a move without you. Think about that. You've paralyzed their ability to think by micromanaging. Now you just have a bunch of robots, not even robots, because AI has robots doing some amazing things nowadays, but just shells of people who are just making the physical motions but aren't actually using their brains. And, I think about all this. I think of two examples on opposite sides of the spectrum. First was with our wireless company, which I know I've talked about plenty of times, had exponential growth in a short span of time. Really was just an amazing company to work with. And I remember somebody asking me, it was during one of our acquisitions, and they said, Daria, everybody at T-Mobile had heard about the growth that you guys were going to have and the plans that you guys had and what you were going to do. And we all thought you guys were kind of crazy. And we thought you were going to fail. It's like, not that we wanted you to fail. You guys are great people, but we thought you were going to fail. Your aspirations were so crazy, so high. One sentence. How can you tell me, how did you guys accomplish it? And I was like, well, that's a lot of pressure. How do you summarize thousands of employees, millions of hours of work, all the hard work that people have put into it, sales, operations, human resources, all these different things? How do I summarize that really into something from an ownership level could resonate? And the one thing I came up with was the owners of our company hired great people, gave them the tools that they needed to be successful, and got the heck out of their way. So how are we successful in being able to do something that people didn't feel like we were going to be able to accomplish? Hire amazing people, give them all the tools they need to be successful, and get out of their way. And when we did that, people were able to get out there and do their jobs, do what they were hired for without feeling shackled, without feeling bogged down. Now, I'm not saying there weren't checks and balances. If we had big things, a new system we were implementing or a new commission policy we were putting out, of course we had to run that by leadership. But it almost at that point was hey, here's all the great work that I've done. Let me show it to you so that we can implement it company-wide, versus having to ask it every step of the way. Oh, is this the right way? Is that the right way? I couldn't imagine the CEO of the company at the time having to deal with all that micromanaging. That we never would have been able to grow. He would have been completely stifled in all the mundane and minutia of the day and wouldn't have been able to grow our business. So that was an example of leadership really saying, we're not going to micromanage you. We hired amazing people. Here's everything you need to be successful. Go do it. The opposite side is I worked in an office where I saw exactly what I said before happen, where one of the team members had an issue with a client, and I was their new supervisor, but there were still supervisors above me. And they were like, oh, I got to go ask so-and-so what to do in this situation. And I said, well, what would you do? And they kind of froze for a second. And for me, it was an issue, but I didn't feel like it was the biggest issue in the world. I was like, well, what would you do? You have a ton of experience. You've been here for years. I got to ask the boss. Like, I understand that, but what would you do? And you could see the panic on her face. Like, she thought she might get in trouble if she actually made a decision. And I had to break that down. I had to break that down and say, you guys are all very experienced. You guys all have been doing this a long time. You all care about our clients. You care about our company. I cannot allow this micromanaging behavior to happen, because now that client is waiting, the employee is fearful. So I did. I was able to turn that around. It was a journey to get there, but we got through it, resulted in all positive things. We continued to have higher sales, happier teams, happier employees. And honestly, the managers that they were going to before had time to work on bigger things than just the day-to-day things that our team should be able to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about now, how does micromanaging, or lack thereof, go back to performance management, which is what we talked about a couple months back. So when I talk to some folks, they genuinely believe that performance management is what happens when we're about to fire somebody. It's, hey, we're going to fire them. So performance managements, or PIPs, are the paperwork we need to get them to a termination. That's not the case. If you listen to my performance management conversation, we know that's not the case. Performance management is simply being clear about what you expect from people, giving people what they need to meet it, and following up. It is not getting ready to fire somebody. So it's not just the annual reviews. It's not just warning letters. It's not HR forms. It is the practice of making sure your team knows what winning looks like. That's it. And then having those conversations. I talked about it last week and the week before. When we're having those conversations regularly, they stop being just negative. They can be motivating conversations too. They can be clarifying conversations. And that's what performance management is all about. So what we have to make sure that we're working on is setting proper expectations, right? Most performance problems start with them not understanding what right looks like. So it's not with a bad employee, but with an unclear expectation. So you guys know I like my list. So we're going to narrow this down to kind of 3 things that every person on your team needs to know. First one, easy. What does a job well done look like? Not just go do a good job. We can't just say that, because your good job, my good job, everybody's standards might be a little bit different. I even had my teenage daughter the other day when she cleaned the bathroom, and I looked at it and I said, doesn't look like you did anything in here. It's still gross. And she said, well, I cleaned it. And I said, well, I'm looking at it. You didn't. She goes, well, maybe the adult's eyes are different than the teenager's eyes. And I said, well, that was a manipulative way to try to get out of cleaning the bathroom again, but I got it. And I was like, you know what? Maybe you do say things a little bit differently than me. So let me actually explain what clean looks like to me. Now, viewers, nobody would have thought her version was clean. Nobody. She was just trying to get out of cleaning the bathroom, but it did give me a moment of pause to say, okay, let me clarify this a little bit differently and show her what right looks like to me. But we have to be specific when we're doing this. What is the standard? What does the output look like when it is done right? The when. When is this output due? They can give you quality work 4 weeks late for a client. Not going to help. So what does it look like when it's right? When is it due? And does it align with our values as a company? That's important. It's not just getting things done by any means necessary. It's getting them done the right way. So if we can hit those 3 things, we're golden. If you can't describe it, they can't hit it. So 1, what does well done look like? 2, how do you know if they're hitting it? What are you measuring? Turnaround time, client satisfaction, error rate, output volume, customer scores. The measurement doesn't have to be complicated. Actually, it can't be complicated, because then it won't work. And we can't have 1,000 of them. We can't have 1,000 KPIs that we're looking at. To be successful and have your teams know if they're hitting their goals, the metric has to be easy to understand, easy to report on, limited. Again, can't have 1,000 of them, but it has to exist. I'll know it when I see it. I have a gut feeling. There's a vibe. None of that's going to work. I've actually seen a supervisor, actually an owner of a business, owner of multiple businesses, have a gut feeling about something. He just kept going with that gut feeling. And when I kept coming back with data, actual numbers, he's like, that can't be right. I'm like, double check my work. It's right. The vibe was off. We can't manage by a vibe. Now, I'm not telling you gut instinct doesn't matter. Our years of experience matter. Our gut instincts do matter, but they have to be backed up by facts. They have to be backed up by data. So make sure we have actual data in front of us. And then third, what happens if they're not hitting those standards? This isn't a threat. This isn't if you don't do it, I'm going to fire you. This is clarity. People perform better when they understand the stakes. Now, whether that stake is client impacting, company impacting, them personally impacting, but not in a fear-based way. And this matters, and here's why way. Set the expectations of the project, excuse me, or the role of a quarter, whatever it might be, and revisit it with them. That's it. Have those conversations. Even if they're doing well, even if they're hitting it, have those conversations, because those could be motivating. If somebody specializes on a long-term project and their energy starts to dip a little bit, having that great job conversation, these metrics, these numbers are great, they're going to fly back up again. So that is the way we want to make sure we're having those conversations with them. So again, the 3 setting expectations that stick. What does the job well done look like? How will you know if they're hitting it? And what happens if they're not hitting it? So now, Daria, we're not micromanaging. What are we, just walking away? Are we just never talking to our employees anymore? No. Micromanaging does not, or the opposite of micromanaging does not mean ignoring. When there's no structured check-in and we don't have those scheduled meetings or one-on-ones, managers kind of hover to fill that vacuum, to fill that empty space. And they'll pop in, they'll call, meetings that weren't on the calendar with almost no notice. They ask for random updates. They request status emails when it wasn't even necessary. This isn't fixing anything. This is just stopping the progress. It's stopping the work. And it's also not allowing the person to be prepared, right? If they know that they have a meeting with you every Tuesday, Monday, they're going to prepare their information for you. If you're just popping in at their desk or on their phone on a Tuesday saying, hey, I need an update right now, they're not ready for that. They may not even present as well as they would if you gave them just a little bit of time to prepare. So make sure with all of your teams, you're building a simple check-in rhythm. Sorry, guys. I don't know what's happening on my throat here. But we want to make sure we're having a simple check-in rhythm. It's going to be different for every company, but make sure we have weekly one-on-ones, clear project milestones, and make an open door policy the norm in your company. I love this so much that we actually had open door policies up on our walls with all of the executives' phone numbers on it so that people knew they can always reach out. So where you can't be micromanaging them as a leader, they can always come back and reach out to you when they need help with that open door. Okay. So if you do have somebody today, because now how do you fix this, right? We know kind of how to fix it going forward. What do you do with some of the folks that have already been there? Every team has had the situation of somebody who used to be great or, maybe just a little under great. And it's been going on long enough that it's a problem. You can't keep waiting. So you have to follow a couple of steps to make sure that we're getting ahead of it. One is name it early. The moment you notice a pattern, not a one-off, not a bad day, still have conversations about that. But when you truly notice a pattern, have a conversation with that person. Not a formal warning, just a conversation. Separate the person from the pattern. You're not making a judgment about them. We talked about this last week. You're addressing what's happening. This isn't a criticism to them. This is actually working with them to try to improve on what's happening, not a criticism of them. Then find out what's happening underneath. What if they are just coasting through the job? That's often a symptom of something else happening. They're bored, they're unhappy, they have something else happening outside of work, they're in a role that no longer fits them, or feeling like nobody's paying attention anyway, right? Ask before you assume that. Find out what's going on underneath. And then be clear on what needs to change and by when. Learned that from a leader not too long ago. We're not just setting the expectations on what needs to happen, but we need a specific timeline of when that's going to happen. And the last step on that goes along with that timeline. Make sure that we're following up. Follow up on the agreed checkpoints too. Now, I'm not going to say things can't get crazy and a meeting has to be pushed, but make sure we're communicating on that and make sure we're following up at that agreed check-in time. Okay? If they're doing better, acknowledge that. If they're not, you have to address it again. But most coasting situations can be fixed, but only if you address them now while they're happening. You can't let it just keep going. Okay. So team, that was kind of a overall view on our how to manage performance without micromanaging. And hopefully what you got away from this really is building the relationship with your team is going to help avoid micromanaging. Having clear SOPs is going to help avoid micromanaging. Making sure that everybody knows what right looks like is going to help avoid that micromanaging. And when you stop micromanaging as a leader, you're going to see, one, the quality of work is going to go up. Two, your employees are going to be so much happier. And third, this is the WIFM, the what's in it for me, you are going to have so much more time to actually dive into the bigger layers of business that you need to be involved in, because you're not going to be bogged down by the day-to-day minutia that your team is really hired to help. So my words of advice for everybody: hire great people, give them all the tools they need to be successful, remove their obstacles, and get the heck out of their way. Let them do the jobs that you brought them on for a reason, and celebrate them when they're doing great. If they're hitting some roadblocks, be there to help them through it. But micromanaging is never the way that's going to get them to the next level or get your company to the next level. So as you all know, I leave a few questions for you when we end off these calls. First is, really think about it now. Are you a micromanager? And if you say no or yes, either way, what do you think makes you a micromanager or not a micromanager? 2, what is the hardest part of holding your team accountable without feeling like the bad guy? That's such a big one. Such a big one. We talked about it over the last couple of weeks. How do we have these accountability conversations without feeling mean? If you didn't catch my last 2 videos, I suggest you watch those if you're struggling with that. And do you have a regular one-on-one cadence with your team? It could be big formal meetings. It could be walks outside. It could be a phone call. It could be a Zoom meeting, whatever it is. But do you have a regular one-on-one cadence with your team? And if you don't, I suggest you get that going. If you need any help with that, of course, you know how to reach out to me. So my action also for this week, I would say, is pick one person on your team and ask them, do you know what doing a job well done looks like? How do you know if you're hitting it? And what happens if you don't? Those are those 3 questions. See if they can answer it. Don't make it your employee who's, you use your gut. I was going to say, don't make it the employee who's been there 10 years, but maybe that is the one, right? Maybe they've just been there so long they don't even know those answers anymore. But have a conversation with one of your teammates or team members about that. What does well done look like? How will I know if I'm hitting it? What happens if I'm not? If they can't answer that, maybe it's time to revisit that with your teams. Okay? So next week, I know I said it at the beginning, but we're ending off on one of the tougher managing day-to-day is, what if we did all this? And I get this question all the time, Darian. This isn't going to work on everybody, and I know that. What happens if it doesn't? What do we do next? So next week is when an employee isn't working out, now what? Now, of course, there are some legal obligations to this. There are some moral obligations, some ethical obligations, and also some team impacting obligations to this. So it can be a little nuanced and a little complex, but when done right, you can make sure your company is protected, your team is still motivated, and that person is treated with the dignity and respect that they deserve, even if they're being exited from your business. So team, go finish your drink, even if it's a strange gingerbug blueberry tea, but go finish your drink, take a deep breath, and go lead with intention today. Thanks so much, everyone.